Hello and welcome to the 5th online MK3D. Now the BFI South Bank is open now, but we'll continue doing the show online until social distancing eases. Now on this show we have 4 great guests who you'll hear from in the next hour. I'll be talking to Be Manzini, who's a poet and the founder of the Caramel Film Club. I'll be talking to her about Clemency and about the legacy of the great Chadwick Boseman. I'll be talking to Segun Akinola, who, as well as being a Scala Radio colleague, composed the music for Doctor Who on TV and for Shola Amoo's brilliant The Last Tree in cinemas. And I'll talk to director Rose Glass, whose feature debut Saint Maud is, for me, one of the most powerful films of this year, and its leading actor Morfydd Clark, also known for Love and Friendship and the personal history of David Copperfield. So stay tuned for that. But first up, as ever, we start with an audience Q&A. Now, if we were live in the BFI South Bank, I'd just take the questions direct from the audience. Of course, since this is an online show, I'm reading them off this laptop. So this came in from Kevin Williams. Is there anything in particular on the London Film Festival schedule that you think we should be looking at? Thanks. Now, as you probably know, I rarely know much about films during the festival season because I pretty much see films the week that they come out. However, I'm very excited about both the opening and closing film. The opening film is Steve McQueen's new film, Mangrove. I'm a huge Steve McQueen fan. And the closing film is Francis Lee's Ammonite, and I'm a huge Francis Lee fan. So those are the two that, I'm already interested in. However, the thing I'd say about all festivals is this. The most exciting thing at any festival, including the LFF, is the thing you don't know anything about. It's the thing that you see by accident at 9 o'clock in the morning because you misbooked your screening. The best thing about festivals is stumbling across films that you don't know about. In fact, I read a tweet by my colleague Wendy Ide recently. She said, there's some really exciting stuff that I can't tell you about. And that's how I want it to be. I want to not be told about it and stumble into it. Like I stumbled into Audition in Edinburgh all those years ago and I still haven't recovered. Here's another question. This is from James Mason. I rewatched The Exorcist 3 recently. Well done. I was surprised by how funny it is. I also saw Spaceballs recently, so I was quite surprised when at one point I heard Father Dyer says, "May the Schwartz be with you." Is there a connection between the two movies, or is Blatty doing something else with this scene? Thanks in advance, Mark. Well, firstly, the thing that everyone forgets about William Peter Blatty, who I'm proud to say was a friend of mine, he was a comedy screenwriter long before he wrote The Exorcist. I mean, he was the guy who co-wrote A Shot in the Dark, which is, the best of the Clouseau films. Comedy was where he began. His first television appearance was with Groucho Marx. So that's where he comes from. It's lovely that people are recognising the comedy in Exorcist 3. In fact, the funniest scene in Exorcist 3, I still think, apart from the scene in the hospital, which is great, not the scary scene in the hospital, the funny scene in the hospital, is the scene when Kinderman does the long talk about why he can't go home because he can't have a bath because there is a fish swimming in his bath. And that scene is, I think, important to the plot. It's more important because it proves and reminds us that Blatty was a great comedy screenwriter. As William Peter Blatty said, after The Exorcist was published, a great career in comedy was wiped out at a single stroke. I may come back to some more questions later depending on time, but for now, let's turn to our first guest. Be Manzini is a poet, filmmaker and spoken word artist and founder of the Caramel Film Club. She does something I couldn't do if I tried. She responds to film in the medium of poetry, and she's extraordinary. She's been a guest on MK3D before, live at the BFI South Bank, and I'm delighted to welcome her back to the show. So we're delighted to be joined in this virtual MK3D by Be Manzini, who of course was a guest in our live shows at the BFI South Bank. Be, welcome back. It's a shame not to be in the same room, but lovely to have you here virtually. How have you been doing? How have you managed through everything that's been going on?
It's lovely to see you, Mark. Yeah, it's been a really tricky time, hasn't it? I mean, the world as we once knew it has just totally changed. So yeah, adjusting is probably the word I would use.
Now, obviously, MK3D will go back to the BFI South Bank when it's possible to do so, and we'd love to have you back on for the live show. But you said that you've been writing. One of the things that we asked you to do is whether you'd be willing to write a couple of things for this show, and I'm glad to hear that you have. And I know that the first thing that you've written that you're going to read for us in a while is about Clemency, the film, which I loved. I was completely knocked out by it, and I wrote a review of it in the Observer. It was 5 stars. I loved everything about it. I loved the soundtrack. I loved the performances. Tell me about why that film is important to you.
Oh, it's such an important film. I mean, Chinua Chuka, who was the writer-director, she was inspired by the real-life story of Troy Davis, who was on death row for 22 years for a crime that was really clear that he did not commit. And she was so impassioned by it that she basically wrote this film as a result. And what we see is, we see Alfre Woodard, who is Bernadine, and she's the prison warden. And Aldous Hodge plays Woods, and he is seeking clemency. And it's just a stellar film in terms of performances, but also the subject matter. I mean, especially in this time that we're living in, where race is so much at the forefront and people talking about Black Lives Matter. It's a really timely and important film looking at what I call the injustice system.
One of the things that really surprised me was that I had heard reports of the film after it first played at film festivals last year. And then it was talked of as an awards contender. Everyone was saying that Alfre Woodard's performance was extraordinary. It was, great work of direction. The score I thought was wonderful. And then when awards season came around, it seemed to have kind of got forgotten about. Why do you think it didn't pick up the kind of plaudits that it should have done?
I think it's still quite unusual. So, I mean, Alfre Woodard is a wonderful actress, but I still think it's quite unusual to have a black female lead. And she holds the film beautifully. As you said, it's an Oscar, award-winning performance.
Yeah.
And I think, her and Wendell Pierce, even that is unusual to have black love displayed in that complicated way. I mean, her life is unraveling in front of our eyes. And so I think that it's sometimes still a hard sell.
So she's a prison warden. She's the warden of a prison which has a death row on it. She is clearly somebody who is at a crossroads in her career in which she does what she has to do, which is, dealing with inmates some of whom are going to face the death penalty. And her argument is, well, I treat them with respect and I go with them on the whole journey, and that's how she kind of justifies it to herself. But during the course of the drama, we see her becoming traumatized by the job. And I read an interview with Alfre Woodard in which she said that in the research they had gone back to interviews with people who do work on death row, who'd said the thing that constantly gets overlooked is the violence that this does to the people working in this environment. It's not just about the death penalty, it's about everything that surrounds it. Did that resonate for you?
Definitely. I mean, I think it's a system that does traumatise people. I think what's interesting having Bernadine as the lead and going through her journey is that you see it from a slightly different perspective, but they both need clemency. That's the really interesting thing about the story.
Now, when you come to write a poem in response to a film, I have no idea how you'd even begin, because I'm a critic, so I'd sit down and go, okay, well, here's who's in it, and here's the basics of the plot, and here's whether I think it works or not. How do you go about approaching it poetically?
It's a good question. So with this particular film, I mean, it's different with each and every one, but with this particular film, it was the scene where Wood says, "I choose when I die." And it's absolutely, it's devastating. It's so harrowing. And it was just indelible for me. I mean, there were other brilliant moments as well, but that really, really, really stuck with me. And I can just remember not breathing for a few minutes. But also I found out that Aldous Hodge is a horologist. So he looks at the study of time. And I thought that was fascinating, that this actor comes to this work with that. And then that just opened up all of this creativity in me, in the sense of me looking at time in a number of ways. So from, ancient Egypt and Kemet to, all of the movements in terms of Black Lives Matters, and putting in intertextual pieces that you'll hear when I read it. So it's kind of like a salute to a lot of activists as well.
Now, bear in mind that I'm kind of a fairly, as far as poetry is concerned, I don't know very much. I like poetry. I don't know much about poetry. Is there anything I need to know in advance? You tell me how I need to be prepared.
I think the only thing I probably need to point out is the story of Osiris and Isis. I don't know if people know that. So
Assume that I don't,
Okay.
and tell me. And this is my favourite phrase: speak to me as if you are speaking to a small child or a Labrador puppy.
Okay, I will try that, Mark. So the story of Osiris and Isis, they were husband and wife. This is part of the pantheon of ancient Egyptian gods and goddesses. And Osiris, unfortunately, was murdered, and the pieces of his body were scattered all over Kemet. And Isis basically spent years trying to find them, pulled them back together, and magically he was reformed, but only for one night. And in that night of passion and joy, Horus was conceived. And Horus is the god of the third eye, of seeing forward and backwards in time. So hence horology. So I've put things like that in there, but the rest of the references I think will be fairly transparent.
Okay, that was great. Thank you for that primer. B, give us your poem. I'd love to hear it.
I decide when I die. I hear you be a winged black god, a sacred spirit, a trinity. You be your own child, you be your own beloved, a horologist that stops time. Crack open a face like a wristwatch, a clock, necklace, a human head, that old American chestnut founding fathers fought to the death. Is that why you blood the wall, scream for the suspended caged birds that too aren't free, whose voices were handcuffed, whose throats were kneed? The feeders in prison pipelines chew on ripened flesh, never created to be eaten. Strange fruit indeed, wood erased from family trees, seeds then planted in a corrosive system. Don't be beaten into their version of what a black bird daring to fly towards freedom is. Don't be weighed down. You rise, you rise, you rise. Be Trinity, be constellation. Osiris, Isis, manifested hawk-headed Horus in just one night. A future visioned. It's time, it's been time for the multitude of sisters and brothers doomed to know the nightmare of being strapped on a gurney in that white room where righteousness is not heard. I have a dream is entombed and haunted by the words running through the walls. Your life matters. Our lives matter. Black gods, beloved child, even then we rarely decide or get to choose when we die.
I feel like if we were in the live auditorium, that's the point at which there'd be a huge pause followed by a huge round of applause. I'm sorry that it's just me, but that was wonderful. That was, and the Philistine that I am, I think I understood a lot of it, which was really, really great. Do you write the poems to be read or to be read out? Because so much of what was happening there was to do with hearing you read it, B.
That's an interesting point. I mean, I write for the page predominantly, but I guess when I'm going through the editing process, I definitely am looking for sound and rhythm and the music within the work.
I have to say that I'm very conscious, as a film critic, that it's often very difficult to describe films in words. I mean, the best films you actually can't describe in words. And maybe poetry is actually closer to doing. I read an essay once that said, the only way you can write a review of a painting is to do another painting. And the older I get and the more I think, that film criticism is it's like banging your head on a wall. The more I think, well, maybe this is the way, maybe we should have more film critic poets. I mean, if somebody said to you, there we go, you could take over as chief film critic for The Observer, you write a poem about a film every week. Would you do it?
I would absolutely do it. No, I love responding to films. And, over the last couple of years, it's been like a wonderful, wonderful niche to have. I mean, lots of people are like, you write, you're a film poet? And I'm like, yeah, that's my favourite space to be in. So I would absolutely do it. We should collaborate, Mark.
hey, I'd be delighted to collaborate. It would be great. I mean, it's, I don't know that you want to be weighed down by the baggage of a 58-year-old, guy who looks like the grandfather from Up. But yeah, it would be great. Now, also, since the last time we spoke, and this was really shocking, I woke up one morning, I had a message from Simon Mayo who said, have you seen the news about Chadwick Boseman? And I think Chadwick Boseman's death has been more shocking than anything I can remember recently, just because it was so out of the blue. And there's been an incredible outpouring, not just of grief, but of admiration and love and respect for his extraordinary body of work. How did you find out about Chadwick Boseman dying?
I was up in the early hours, so I literally saw it once the press release went out, and I was totally taken aback. I mean, I think that the most surprising thing is that he was working while he was having treatment for colon cancer and producing magnificent work. I mean, the athleticism and the energy that it takes normally to produce that kind of thing, let alone when you're having chemo and surgery, it's phenomenal.
It's extraordinary when you look back at the body of work that he did. I remember remarking when Get On Up came out that I thought you'd never be able to make that film because you'd never be able to get somebody to fill the central role. And then he's so brilliant in it. And, 42 and 21 Bridges and Black, all these different roles. In fact, I think it's quite possible for people to have seen Chadwick Boseman in a couple of films and not realised it was the same guy, because he had that, he was an actor. He was different for every performance, wasn't he?
Yeah, he absolutely was. And it's interesting that you say that, because when he depicted James Brown, I absolutely didn't make the link until much later, because he just did it with, just such smoothness. I'm really interested about the characters that he picks. I mean, you've mentioned some of them. So, James Brown, Jackie Robinson, Thurgood Marshall, and he picks these really iconic parts to play, because I really think that he wanted to create work that was inspirational and about hope to the Black community, and give voice to there's something beyond the slave narrative, there's something beyond the thug narrative, to be able to embody so many different characters and in a way that's absolutely authentic and believable, and that you are totally immersed in the work. I don't come out of his films, I'm totally in them, and that's a wonderful cinematic experience. Very thankful.
Same as every other film critic, I paid what tribute I could by saying, look, here are all these films, they're all great, the films live on, go back and see them again. Because one of the wonderful things about cinema is that the work does live on. I mean, it genuinely does. However, once again, we come to this point about, is there a better way of responding? And I know that you have a somewhat more poetic response, or more poetic tribute. So tell me how you would start thinking about paying tribute to somebody like Chadwick Boseman through the poetic form.
Yeah, it was interesting, because I actually started 4 different pieces of writing. And what I'm going to share with you later is the one that I settled on for today. But I think that because his work was so important, and because he's a man of such gravitas, it isn't actually a 1-poem deal. I definitely needed to do more than that, and I had a couple ideas that I'm kind of rejigging. But yeah, no, it's been a real joy to write this short piece.
You say joy. I think one of the interesting things about what's happened since he died is that there has been an outpouring of grief and shock, obviously, but actually there's been a lot of very positive response, hasn't there? People have remembered the roles that he played, the strong roles that he played, the strong role model that he was, and have just, it's actually been a very, very positive response.
Yeah, I think because of, who he was, not only in terms of in front of the camera but behind the camera. I mean, while he was having his treatment, he was also working with like Make-A-Wish Foundation and going to see seriously ill children and things like that. And when you hear Ryan Coogler or any of his cast members from any of the films talk about who he was and the integrity that he brought to the space, but the professionalism and how he made them better actors because he always brought his A game. There's just so many different aspects to how he lived his life that I'm really honoured to write this. And I guess the joy comes from a life well lived. He was only 43 years old. And, despite that, he packed so much into it. And I think that that's inspirational on so many different levels.
So, B, I'm going to ask you to read us your, what do we, is it a poem? Is it a tribute? What do we call it?
I guess it's a poetic tribute, but it's more prosaic this time. So yeah, as you will hear. Dear Chadwick Boseman, we never knew how much we needed you. You are more than an actor, a storyteller, a portrait of what greatness can look like. In the frame you danced like Brown, home ran like Robinson, and had the integrity of Marshall. You depicted icons, no dress rehearsal needed because you were already a king in waiting for the moment to reveal your sovereignty. Heavy is the head that wears the crown, but you made it seem light, moving swiftly to make every day a movie. Thank you for sharing moments with us. I pray as you reach your final resting place, you are trumpeted in. I know we will watch you slide in shiny shoes, past posts to win a game or stand in righteous defense. You won so many battles, teaching the next generation of actors, storytellers, activists, leaders, vanguards, and us mere mortals how to be superheroes. Although your body didn't heal, you healed millions of minds that needed reminding that Black is brave, resilient, and dynamic. And the children will wear this skin colour in your honour with a little more shine, a brighter twinkle in their eyes, a little more purpose in the way they move. Forever we will call your name.
Thank you. That was lovely. That was really powerful. But again, positive, as we were just saying beforehand. The message of that is absolutely positive. It's about the stuff that was left behind being a legacy that will live on, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the world is definitely a better place with Chadwick Boseman having been in it. And, the Wakanda Forever salute that is so famous now, because of his central performance. He just held that film amazingly. And I think when I look at, social media and Instagram, and I look at the variety of tributes that people are paying to him, it's also creating more and more art, not just in terms of poetry, but there's videos and photographs and things that are being created. So he continues to inspire and will do for a long time.
Well, thanks ever so much. It's been lovely having you on the virtual show. When we're back in the BFI, you'll come back on again, I hope, and do the live show when everything's, when all this is behind us and whatever the new normal looks like has arrived. It'd be lovely to have you back on the show. So you'll come back?
I will, absolutely. Thank you, Mark.
Thanks very much, B. I look forward to seeing you in person in the not too distant future. Thanks to Be Manzini. You can find details of how to watch Clemency on the Caramel Film Club screening room in the text below the video. Now, my next guest is one of my favourite composers, a BAFTA breakthrough Brit, best known to some as the composer for Jodie Whittaker's Doctor Who, but best known to me as the man behind the music for Shola Amoo's film The Last Tree. He is Segun Akinola. So, it's my great pleasure to welcome to this online MK3D Segun Akinola. Segun, I wish we were doing this in person, but obviously we're still in the middle of, the dog ends of lockdown. So, a virtual hello to you. How are you and what have you been doing during the recent weeks and months?
Virtual hello to you too. It's great to be here and great to be chatting. I was one of those who was working on a project which still had some filming to do. So obviously once the lockdown came in, everything got shut down and it was all paused. And it's quite unusual to have everything just ripped away very quickly. And of course it's been the same for so many other people in the industry.
So do you manage to do most of your composition from home usually anyway?
Yes, yeah. Unless I'm working with another musician or I'm going into the edit suite or anything, I basically do everything here.
So what have you got around you? I can see a keyboard, but I mean, is it a keyboard and then a computer system, or what are you surrounded by?
So I'm surrounded by, yes, I've got this kind of keyboard here, which doesn't actually hold any sounds, but it basically controls a whole load of sounds on my computer here. So that might be like a piano sound, but it could also be some strings or, I don't know, a recorder or a guitar, whatever it might be. I have quite a minimal setup. I'm not really surrounded by lots and lots of stuff, but I am surrounded by instruments. So I have over here, look, I'll even show you. I've got one of my drums from Nigeria is here, and I've got loads of tambourines, as you do.
You can never have too many tambourines.
No. I mean, I literally found one the other day in another area where I live that I didn't even realise I had. I'd forgotten.
If you put 2 of them in a cupboard, you come back 3 years later, there's 10. It's a really weird thing. They've got like a whole life cycle. It's really, really strange.
They multiply on command.
One, two, three,
The reason that that you particularly sprung into my mind was because I recently did an introduction for the BFI to The Last Tree, and I was just watching the film again, and I remembered how much I had loved the score. Just get us up to speed with how did you first break into film and TV? What was your first? Can you remember your first credit?
Yeah, my first credit was Panorama, and it was quite a funny one. I think I met someone who then stood next to someone else who just happened to be working as a journalist, I think, if I remember correctly. And we just got talking and then kind of went from there, and he happened to be working on something and was like, well, do you have any suggestions? And I was like, oh, well, why don't I write you something? And this is it. And that was the beginning, really. And then I was able to go on from there and do more and do Black and British A Forgotten History was probably one of the first things I did that really got a few people to take notice. And that, again, led to more work and eventually also led to working on Doctor Who.
Yeah, and you sort of throw that away as if it's eventually working on Doctor Who. Like it's so let's just give that the gravitas that it deserves. Working on round of drum roll, please.
Yeah,
Doctor Who. Oh, come on. So tell us about that.
Yeah, that was a Wednesday morning. I got the phone call, and
I love that you remember what day it was.
Yeah, do you know what? There are certain moments in your life you just can't forget at all, and it was just completely out of the blue. Had this phone call saying, "Can we pass your number on to the producers for Doctor Who? Because looking at your work and looking at you to be the composer for Doctor Who." Complete shock for me. I had no idea about anything. Obviously, I said yes and left it there and didn't really expect to hear anything very quickly. But I actually did. Then a couple of days later, I had a chat with the exec producer, and then set up a chat with Chris Chibnall, the new showrunner, a few days after that. And we just clicked immediately, like very, very genuinely and very immediately, just really, really clicked. Then I kind of wrote a little bit of music, sent it a few days later, sent it over to them, waited a few days, had another chat with him. And then a few days later, I had the job. So it was quite a quick turnaround in some ways, but it was very intentional and it was quite intense as well.
I think the idea of working on... I mean, Doctor Who has been around for as long as I can remember. I mean, Patrick Troughton was my first Doctor Who, so I go back that far. And I just think the idea of being asked to work on anything like that is quite mind-boggling. So my other question on it would be, how much freedom do you have? And how much do they say to you, look, we love everything you do, but this is what we want it to sound like?
I mean, almost total freedom. So certainly in terms of setting up new sounds. So my remit, if you will, when I came on board was, there's going to be a new sound to Doctor Who. It's going to be your sound. Figure out what that sound is. And it was simply a case of, it just won't be what it was before. But whatever that is, it's got to be you and it's got to be your voice. And they really stressed that, actually. And really made it clear that they wanted me to bring myself to it. And they wanted it to be fresh. And they let me have the time to experiment and try different things out to find the sound that we got to. And then from that point, of course, I mean, if they don't like it, they're going to say, no, we don't like that. Can it be slightly different? But they did like it, and I started writing character themes for certain characters who would be in it throughout the series, and they liked all of that, and they liked the sound world I'd come up with. And then beyond that, of course, every episode we have a discussion about the music, especially because with me coming board and with the new musical direction, the other aspect is that the music was going to be changing every week depending on where the story was taking place. So we have a lot of in-depth conversations about the music and where it's going, but what it's doing and what it's saying, and are we kind of taking inspiration from anywhere? We have taken a lot of inspiration from different places musically. It's a very good collaboration. It's really there's a lot of back and forth and a lot of trust and respect.
Shola Amoo, who's spoken so passionately about working with you, can you say something about your working relationship with Shola?
It's just brilliant. I mean, he's just a phenomenal director, and he's phenomenal to work with, and you don't always get both of those. That's the truth of it. But we have a wonderful experience working together. We have a lot of fun. We work really, really hard as well. We work extremely hard because whatever you hear is probably about 10% of what we've worked on. Yeah. But that's because we have a wonderful experimentation on everything that we work on. It really is a case of trying a scene or a sequence in a lot of different ways, trying music that is sometimes very, very different to try and find the right sound and the right approach to whatever we're working on. So we do work really hard, but it's not from a perspective of either of us not knowing what we like or what we think is working, but really about finding what's right for the story. And the great thing about that is that Shola's also up for trying anything. You know, if it's a case of, well, let's try this thing. It's a bit of a crazy idea, but let's go for it. He's totally up for doing that. So yeah, it's one of those relationships where we know going into it, okay, we're going to work really hard, but there's such a great deal of respect and trust, and knowing that whatever happens, we will get there and we will find the best version of whatever it is that we're trying to do.
I wasn't the only person who, in reviewing Last Tree, pointed out how important the music was. As a result of Last Tree, did it open opportunities for you? Because it was, a properly theatrical, an astonishing leap up from A Moving Image. I have to say, I just think it was just like, that was such a different level of film. How did the response to that affect you?
I think it's been very interesting because I think that a lot of people will know me mainly for Doctor Who and will kind of think that that's the thing that opens up so many doors for me. And of course it does. It does have an impact. But I actually find people talk to me more about the score of The Last Tree than anything else when I tend to go in and have a conversation or meet someone new or talk about... I
just like to say I was there first. I don't care about all these other things. I'm thrilled. It's great. I was there first.
Well, you have to own up to these things. I always find that filmmakers actually talk about The Last Tree first, and I think at first that did surprise me. Not from any perspective other than just, as I say, particularly if anyone's doing a write-up and I come up, it's usually Doctor Who, and I completely understand that because it's Doctor Who. It's a huge show globally. But I think there's something actually musically about The Last Tree that resonates with people, which I'm of course really, really pleased about, and resonates with filmmakers as well. And so it has definitely opened up more doors and more opportunities.
And how soon before you're able to be back in a room with other musicians? And do you have... I have no idea what musical ensembles would be possible at the moment.
Well, the good news is that recording is happening in London, and orchestral recordings are happening. There are some very, very strict guidelines, of course, but at Air Studios in London and at Abbey Road, they are doing orchestral recording, which is really great news. studios are open, engineers are working, musicians are working. So many people for whom everything stopped a few months ago. So I will get to be back into a studio with musicians in the next few months, which I'm very excited about.
It's a totally different thing, but I mean, I just play in a 4-piece band, and it's driving me nuts. This is the longest we haven't played together in my whole life. I started being in bands when I was 12. I've never gone 3 months without playing with, because that's what I did. I never played football, didn't go to parties, didn't have friends. I was very happy incidentally. Just played in bands my whole life. Was never any good, but was very, very, very dedicated. And so this is the longest period that I haven't played music with other people for, and it's driving me nuts because there's only so much you can do with a bass solo. After a while, it's just terrible. So I'm really looking forward to it.
Just to say, I've had a little bit of your bass playing and it's great. So let's not do a disservice to your playing. I was very impressed.
In the words of the great Barry Manilow, I live through my music. I hope you can live through it too. Or I suffered for my art. Now it's your turn. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been lovely talking to you, and I can't wait to do this again in the flesh when all this stuff is behind us. Thank you very much, the great Segun Akinola.
Pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. And yes, great to chat more in future.
My thanks to Segun Akinola. Now, in lockdown, the BFI have been working harder than ever to bring films into your homes. The cinemas are now opening, but the BFI still needs your support. If you're enjoying this show, please show your support for the BFI by making a donation. You can donate £5 by texting BFI at home to 70085. Text costs £5 plus one standard rate message. Thank you so much. Okay, back to the trusty laptop to read these questions. This came in from Kathy Ellis. Mark, we are fascinated by the books behind you in your study. They're not here for this particular link, are they? But in the other links. And, interestingly enough, I wonder if I've got this here. Hang on, this is genuinely me looking to see whether I've got something on my... Okay, I have. The Exorcist. This is an original novel copy from when the novel came out in the early 1970s. Our question is, do you organise them specifically for the show, or are they always like that? In fact, we took a photo of the screen so we could examine them in even more detail. Thanks. Big fans of the show. Can't wait to reconvene at the BFI South Bank. Here's the truth. That is it's my office. It's a shoe cupboard. It's the smallest room in the house, and I needed somewhere where I could put all my stuff. And I was told, all right, you can have that room. So that room looks like that because that's everything. That's all my silent running stuff, all my Elvis stuff, all my Exorcist stuff, everything. And it's just arranged on that shelf because that's where things fitted in. There's no rhyme or reason behind it. I mean, if I get a new book in, I have to sort of like to put it so I can see the cover. But no, that is genuinely the clutter in which I live. And one more question. This came in on our Patreon page. Do visit our Patreon page. It's fantastic. Loads and loads of extra stuff there. This came in from Joseph O'Hara. Now that you've made your way into the land of telly, have I? Okay. Yes, that's scary. Do you think the future of proper character development and storytelling lies in HBO-style miniseries rather than film? For example, miniseries such as Chernobyl and John Adams. The thing that happened to me over lockdown, as you may know if you watched the TV show that I did with Simon Mayo, so I watched all of The Wire from beginning to end, which was just life-changing. I finished watching Breaking Bad, which was absolutely brilliant. I watched Chernobyl, which was great. Not quite on the same level as everybody else, but I thought it was really, really great. And I'm now absolutely embedded in Better Call Saul. And yes, it has made me really excited about television for the first time in a long time, for the first time since Life on Mars. I know I'm late to this party, but I'm late to most parties. I'm still upset by the fact that Bill Haley isn't still around. So yeah, it is probably the future of long-form drama. And if I ever said otherwise, I was wrong. Now, every summer on my audio podcast, Kermode on Film, I list the top and bottom 10 films of the year so far. And one of the films I couldn't include most recently because it hadn't yet been released was Saint Maud. It's a remarkable feature debut from writer-director Rose Glass with a mesmerising central performance by Morfydd Clark. And watching it put me in mind of movies like the German drama Requiem, which I love, and I was thrilled to get the chance to talk to Rose Glass and Morfydd Clark. It's my great pleasure to welcome Morfydd and Rose to the show. I went to see the film knowing nothing about it at all, other than that I was told, you really have to see this film, and the best thing is you know nothing about it at all. So, Rose, tell us the basic setup of the story and where it comes from.
Sure, it's I guess a psychological horror film, and it's follows the journey of this young reclusive live-in nurse called Maud, who's played by Morfydd, and she goes to care for her newest patient, Amanda, this retired dancer played by Jennifer Eady. And I guess she's got quite an intense, unusual relationship with God. She's a very devout Christian, and she thinks that God's kind of sending her secret signs, and she's in direct communication with him. And she gets it into her head that she's been sent to this new patient to save her soul before she dies. And she embarks on that mission, and things go a bit wrong.
I think things go a bit wrong is like saying The Exorcist is about a girl who has a bit of a bad day.
Hi, are you Maud?
Yes. Dear God, it takes nothing special to mop up after the decrepit and the dying. Can you feel that?
Yep.
But to save a soul, that's quite something.
Morfydd, tell us about the character and tell us about your reaction to the script when you read it.
I read it knowing my agent had gone mad about it, kind of rung me in this like big excited flurry, like, you have to read this. So I kind of went to it like, what's got her so excited? And I'm kind of quite bad at sitting down and reading for more than 10 minutes at a time, and I just did this all at once, and kind of then remember just lying in bed just staring at the ceiling, kind of the same feeling that you're saying you had. And I kind of kept not having any idea what was going to come next, and then every time it did there was this awful inevitability, so it was kind of, I immediately thought it was wonderful and couldn't stop thinking about it.
I know this is something that actors always get asked, but is there anything in the character that struck a chord with you? Did you recognise any of the stuff that she was going through?
Yeah, I think definitely. I think that I really feel that she's a millennial is important, because I feel she's kind of got this obsession with productivity and being useful, and that she's kind of here for some sort of reason. And kind of I quite like that, despite clearly knowing when it's set, that she has a phone that isn't an iPhone or something, so she's kind of removed herself from that. But I feel that her loneliness and her desire to not have wasted anything is something that I feel that everyone has some sort of link to, and I definitely did. And that she's just like often says the wrong thing. I was kind of, found it easier than it should have been to understand her, I don't know.
One of the things that I think is really great about the film, when I was trying to describe it to somebody, there was two films that it reminded me of just tonally. One of them is a film called Requiem with Sandra Huller, which I absolutely love, and another one is a movie called Stations of the Cross, and both of those are films about people who believe that they're having a religious experience, and both of them go out of their way to not fall either way, to allow the audience to read it either way. And I think one of the great things about St. Maud is that it keeps its ambiguity going for as long as possible. Tell me about playing that. When you're playing the character, you have to believe what the character believes, that they are in direct contact with the Almighty.
Yeah. I kind of looked at it totally through Maud's eyes to start with. But I also think what was quite helpful was just like really thinking of what it would have been like to be a nurse before that for her, that there's kind of is the element of self-sacrifice and kind of saintlyhood with that, and that had come kind of, that makes sense within that context. So whenever I kind of couldn't understand her, I tried to think of that aspect of her.
I mean, I think it's a brilliant balancing act, because in order for the audience to become completely involved in the film, they have to see the world through two separate. They have to see the world through Maud's character. They also have to see what it actually looks like from the outside. I think that's the hardest thing to get right. I think most films, about halfway through, they go, oh no, it is a Dybbuk, or it is a whatever it is. About halfway through, they'll just settle down and what. But I love the fact that you kept that as ambiguous as it was for as long as it. I mean, right up to the climax, as far as I'm concerned. I thought it was a superb balancing act. That's not a question, incidentally. That's just a kind of general telling you how much I liked the film. What was the greatest challenge when you were doing it? What was the most difficult thing?
To be honest, the writing, like I kind of feel like before doing this, that was the area I was kind of least confident in. Like I'd sort of done a bunch of short films and had written the scripts for those, but a 20-minute short to a feature-length thing seems like a massive leap. And like went to film school, but most of the emphasis is sort of on directing. I knew like the premise of the story I had quite early on, sort of, you know, more staying with her patient, talking to God, thinks that she's been sent on this mission. I had a few scenes and I had the ending, but I think it was like a good couple of years after film school just trying to work on the treatment, and then a couple of years development with the script, and I just got incredibly stressed, I think, and you start to sort of lose perspective and like whether you're sort of writing this thing, you're like, does this make sense, or is this just nonsense, or and sort of massive imposter syndrome, and just very freaked out by it. You know, it's an amazing, exciting opportunity, but it's kind of all I ever wanted to do, so it's very daunting. But then I think once stuff was sort of all happening, then it was very fun.
Morfydd, from your point of view, what made you trust Rose? What made you know that she would be able to pull the film off, other than just simply reading the script?
No, I never really thought about it like that. I just kind of, I think I still just was like, whenever I'm casting something, I kind of worry about the sanity of the director that's cast me, but also feel like just allow myself to be very confident in them. It's like two really opposing things. But it became very clear that kind of the whole team was so behind Rose and so behind the story, and that kind of was really like wonderful to feel going into it, that you felt like everyone was putting their absolute best into it. And also like there were lots of people in this film who it was their first kind of job as head of department or something, so we were all in the same boat, just trying to kind of get this vision to life, really. So we're on the same page.
Yeah, it was a really great team of people. I think we all had a really nice time making it, despite that I think people think that like, oh, the film's a bit sort of intense and dark, so the filmmaking process must have been like that, and then we're all like, no, it's really fun actually. But yeah, as Morfydd said, it's like Ben Fordsman, our DOP, it was his first film as well, and Adam, our composer. So yeah.
Morfydd, the entire story is centred on your character. I mean, you're right at the centre of the film all the way through, and I was conscious watching it that it's not just that, you know, it's a psychodrama. It is also a very physical performance. Tell us about the physicality of playing that role.
Rose kind of tested me on this in the audition. So my final audition was the scene in the flat where she is kind of at her lowest and most physically kind of contorted and tortured. And I'm actually so glad that we did that in the audition, because it meant that when we got to filming it, I already knew that she was capable of getting to that point of like distress and like physical agony. I feel that it almost is those days when you're kind of really focusing on a physical thing tend to kind of go faster and be easier, I'd say. And I really love those like the parts of it that are kind of like, particularly with the hand and the scab and stuff, kind of it felt like a relief to kind of, because she's so contained sometimes, filming those scenes that were very out there kind of helped in terms of understanding her, because there was a sort of relief to getting out of the stillness of it.
So, Carol, how did you and Mandy meet?
We met online.
Ah, so now you have a ménage à trois.
Hardly. Maud doesn't like Carol. Funny, I can't figure out if she's a bigot or if she's just jealous. You know, she went sneaking behind my back to try to scare Carol away. To save my soul, if I understand correctly.
Excuse me.
And tell me about your relationship with Jennifer Ehle, because obviously those two characters are, you know, they're polar opposites when we first meet. So tell me about working with her.
I'm sure there's loads of wonderful actresses, but I think I was so lucky to be with Jennifer, because she was so nurturing and kind to me, and it definitely wasn't her first big job, and I was kind of like, it was quite useful in terms of Maud, because I was in awe of her. I'd grown up kind of, whenever I was off school, being allowed to watch David Attenborough or Pride and Prejudice, because my mum liked it. And so she was so familiar to me, and so, wow. But also we shot, because almost all of it's in the one house, we were very lucky to be able to shoot chronologically. So as I got to know Jennifer more, Maud and Amanda's relationship was kind of becoming more intense. So that definitely helped to kind of not jump into the end in terms of this. It was really useful.
So Rose, what was it that you saw in Morfydd that made you think, okay, that's the person I want for that role? At what point did you first start thinking of her for the character?
I mean, pretty much as soon as we saw our first tape, like we did a sort of fairly, I guess, traditional route through the casting for Maud. Like we worked with the casting director and saw quite a lot of people, and Morfydd was pretty much the last person you sent in a tape. And I think me and my producers were sort of like, brilliant, great, got it. And then we actually had to, I mean, because the character's in pretty much every shot in the film and definitely every scene, and it's all inside our head. So basically, unless we knew we needed to find someone who's just sort of fascinating and you can't take your eyes off. Because if you don't, and I don't know, if you don't buy into her, then the whole film just sort of falls apart. To be honest, Morfydd, I think one of the main things I sort of loved about her, the fact that she's really funny. And it's not like a comedy film, obviously, but it has quite a lot of playful, dark humour in it. And the scenes that we'd been getting people to read, I think Morfydd was one of the only ones who like just really made me laugh at points, which I thought was really important. But yeah, the finances, I think at first were a little bit kind of, oh, maybe like she's a really good actress, but can she like do all the really sort of dark, messed up scenes? And so that's when we actually got Morfydd to come in to do the scene she was talking about, where she's sort of at her lowest point and kind of like asks for a sign from God and kind of has a seizure and vomits everywhere. So that was a weird one probably to do in a sterile casting room with no special effects. But we did that and then sent it to them and they were like, oh, great, okay, yes, no, she's brilliant. Yeah, we'll do it.
I thought the performance was astonishing. Were you both together when the film was first shown in front of an audience? Because obviously, where was the first time that an audience saw it?
Official premiere was Midnight Madness at Toronto Film Festival, and we were both there. It was really fun.
And what was it like? Because I always imagine that the first time you show your film, no matter how much confidence you have in it, the first time you show your film to an audience, it must be a terrifying experience. So tell me what it was like seeing it play.
Just really surreal, to be honest. I was honestly, and I think the great thing it's a great festival, obviously, but I think particularly Midnight Madness is quite fun because most people I think in the audience have like had a few drinks already, so they're that bit more vocal. And just the relief when you hear people kind of like wincing in the right place or laughing in the right place, or like if a jump scare works, it is, and you get a really vocal reaction. It's really pretty sort of exciting. Was it a great experience seeing it, or was it a scary experience seeing it? I can't imagine what watching yourself playing that role must be like. I have no idea what that must be like.
The film makes me very sad when I think of Maud. I think like throughout filming of it, that was the bit that kind of got me, was just sometimes thinking about Maud and kind of her reality and stuff. And I guess I've never been in anything where I'm on screen for that long, and so I guess it was one of the first times where I'd got used to that I was doing it, and then so by the end I was kind of like, oh no, poor Maud, that's happened. But it was wonderful seeing kind of fully grown men being scared by me in the cinema, which is something that I didn't imagine would ever happen. The idea that I could be scary was a shock.
What is the release strategy now? Because obviously everything's been, so chaotic since the whole COVID thing. Rose, do you know I imagine we're opening theatrically. Do you have dates and things?
Yes, so all I know is that we're releasing in the UK on October the 23rd. So we'll be in cinemas around the country then. And I think some other countries in Europe at least. America, we were literally sort of 4 days away from getting on a plane and going to LA and doing this whole like sort of press thing when the film was going to be released like in April, and then that all got put on hold, and then we were going to get released in July, and now we're on hold again in America. So TBC America, 23rd of October, England.
Well, look, thanks so much for joining us, albeit remotely. As I said, I'm a huge fan of the film. I think it's great. I think it'll be a big success when it comes out. I think it's really important to see it on a big screen. I think it needs to be seen projected, because I think so much of it is to do with, the atmosphere of it and the sound. Again, when you're in a cinema, the sound is very different to watching it at home. So anyway, congratulations. And hopefully when this is all behind us, we can welcome you live to the BFI South Bank. You can come and do one of the live shows. So thanks very much to both of you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mark.
Thanks to Rose and Morfydd. St Maud is on release on the 9th of October. Do seek it out. It's terrific. And thank you for watching. Our next show will be the day after the London Film Festival finishes on the 19th of October. Thanks to the BFI for taking the show online. And if you've enjoyed the show, please make a donation to support the BFI. You can donate £5 by texting BFI at home to 70085. Text costs £5 plus one standard rate message. Now, we always end the show with a musical moment that captures the way that music enhances film. And what better way to end this show than with the magic of Chadwick Boseman as James Brown in Get On Up.
She said, son, give away from that woman. My mama didn't know what kind of dog you was putting down.